Let me tell you something most people overlook. When a woman finally learns to turn her focus inward, when she embraces silence, she doesn't disappear. She becomes more powerful than ever. This silence I'm talking about, it isn't empty, and it's not weakness. It's a different kind of presence. The kind of stillness that doesn't need to shout to be heard. It doesn't beg anyone to understand. It quietly declares, "I am enough." Think about it. In a world where everyone is rushing to explain themselves, to prove their worth, to answer every criticism, silence is rare. And that rarity is what makes it powerful. Have you ever noticed how the quietest person in the room often holds the most weight? It's not because they lack something. It's because they no longer feel the need to perform. Silence says, "I know who I am. I don't need to chase. I don't need to convince. I don't need to fight to be seen." And when a woman finds that place within herself, everything around her begins to shift. People sense it. They may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. This kind of presence doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from letting go, from no longer pouring energy into places that drain you, and finally reclaiming it for yourself. And here's the truth. When you stop needing the world's approval, the world starts to rearrange itself around you.
Silence is one of the most misunderstood forces in life. Most of us were taught to believe silence means weakness, or that if you don't defend yourself, people will walk all over you. But here's the truth. Real silence is not a collapse. It's a boundary. Think about it. Have you ever been in a heated argument where one person keeps raising their voice, piling on more and more words, trying to win the moment, while the other just sits quietly, grounded, breathing slowly? Which one do you remember more, the loud one or the quiet one who carried calm in the middle of the storm? That kind of silence is not avoidance. It's not passive-aggressive. It's presence. It's choosing not to waste your energy where it won't be received. And science backs this up. When you fall into constant reactivity, arguing, explaining, defending, your nervous system goes into fight or flight. Your heartbeat rises, your thinking narrows, and you lose clarity. But when you pause, when you breathe, and stay quiet, your body shifts into the parasympathetic state. That's the part of your nervous system designed for rest, healing, and wisdom. So silence isn't emptiness, it's a biological reset button. I've seen this play out in real life. A friend of mine, let's call her Linda, spent years defending herself in her marriage. Every time her husband questioned her choices, she jumped in with explanations, reasons, long justifications. She thought if she could just say enough, he would finally understand. But it never worked. It only left her exhausted. One day, during yet another tense conversation, she simply stopped. She listened, she breathed, and she said nothing. For the first time in years, she didn't fill the space. Do you know what happened? He became unsettled, not because she was being cold, but because for the first time she wasn't playing the same old game. Her silence spoke louder than any argument could. From that moment, their dynamic began to shift, not overnight, but slowly, steadily. And it all started with her choice to be silent. Here's the thing. Silence is a mirror. When you stop reacting, people's true intentions start to reveal themselves. Some will lean in, trying to understand you better. Others will expose their lack of respect or their need for control. Either way, you gain clarity without draining yourself in the process. But silence also requires courage. For many women, and men too, it feels unnatural. We've been conditioned to explain ourselves, to prove our worth, to smooth things over. But the more you do that, the more power you hand away. True power comes from knowing you don't have to explain your every move. You don't owe everyone an answer. Ask yourself, how many times have you over-explained just to avoid being misunderstood? How many times have you drained yourself trying to convince someone who never intended to listen? What if instead you let your silence be the answer? That doesn't mean you never speak up. Of course, words have their place. But when you choose silence, not out of fear, but out of strength, you change the entire energy of the moment. Let me share something fascinating from neuroscience. Researchers have found that when we deliberately pause, even for just a few breaths, the brain shifts activity from the amygdala, where fear and reactivity live, to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for wisdom, problem-solving, and emotional regulation. In simple terms, silence makes you smarter. It helps you see clearly. It gives you perspective. So the next time you feel pulled into an argument or pressured to defend yourself, remember, you don't always need more words. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is none at all. Silence says, I will not waste my energy here. I know my worth. I choose peace over performance. And when you live from that place, something amazing happens. People begin to treat you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because you embodied it. They feel your steadiness. They notice your calm. And over time, the world begins to adjust around you. That is the hidden strength of silence. Not an absence, but a presence. Not weakness, but power. A power that doesn't shout, doesn't beg, doesn't argue, because it doesn't need to.
Let me share with you two stories, real, simple stories, that reveal the quiet strength hidden inside silence. The first is about Mina. She's a woman in her late 50s, a mother, a wife, and for many years the caretaker for her aging parents. Her life had always revolved around others. She knew everyone's needs before they even spoke them. She could anticipate moods, fix problems, soften conflicts. In many ways, she was the glue that held her family together. But when her children grew up and left home, and when her parents passed on, Mina was left with something she had not experienced in decades: silence. At first, that silence was terrifying. Without constant demands pulling her in every direction, she didn't know what to do with herself. Have you ever felt that way? When the noise finally stops, you realize you don't even know the sound of your own voice anymore? Mina began slowly. She took morning walks without her phone. She started journaling, not for anyone else to read, just for herself. She allowed herself to say no without guilt, to sit without obligation. And in that stillness, she discovered something powerful. She no longer felt pulled in 20 directions. She stopped reacting to every mood around her. And people began to treat her differently, not because she demanded respect, but because she radiated it. Her silence became her boundary, and her presence became her strength. Now let me tell you about Jasmine. She's in her 40s, a professional woman, ambitious and hardworking. But she had a habit. Every time someone questioned her, she would jump in with explanations.
If her partner misunderstood her, she explained. If her colleagues doubted her, she defended herself. She thought if she just used the right words, they would finally see her clearly. But words can become chains. The more she explained, the more drained she felt. One day, during a heated conversation with her partner, Jasmine felt that old familiar urge rising, the need to defend, to justify. But instead, she stopped. She breathed. She said nothing. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. And that silence changed everything. Her partner was unsettled, not because she was punishing him, but because for the first time, she didn't make herself emotionally available for conflict. She didn't feed the fire. And in that stillness, she realized something profound. Her peace was not up for negotiation. Science tells us that when we choose silence in the middle of tension, we shift the brain out of fight or flight and into higher reasoning. We literally create space for wisdom. But beyond the science, there's a deeper truth here. Both Mina and Jasmine discovered that silence is not emptiness. It is presence. It is choosing to stop explaining, stop overgiving, stop pouring energy into places that do not return it. Ask yourself, how many times have you tried to explain yourself to someone who had already made up their mind? How many times have you exhausted yourself only to realize your words weren't being heard anyway? What if instead of giving more words, you gave yourself silence? That's what Mina did. That's what Jasmine did. And that's what shifted their lives. Because silence, when chosen with awareness, doesn't push people away. It draws the right ones closer. It creates respect without force. It says without saying, I know who I am. I don't need to convince you. My presence is enough. And the moment you realize that, the world begins to treat you differently.
Have you ever noticed how life has a way of reflecting back what's going on inside of us? It's almost as if the world is a mirror, quietly showing us the state of our own hearts. Think about it. When your mind is restless, when you're anxious or unsettled, doesn't it seem like chaos finds you at every corner? Arguments spark more easily, misunderstandings pile up, even small problems feel heavy. But when you're centered, when your heart is calm, life itself seems calmer. People respond differently. Respect comes more naturally. Love feels lighter, safer, more genuine. This is what I call the mirror effect. The inner world creates the outer world. And it's not magic, it's resonance. People feel your energy before they hear your words. They can sense if you're desperate for approval or if you're anchored in your own worth. Let me give you an example. I once knew a woman who carried deep, unresolved grief. On the outside, she looked fine, smiling at work, polite with friends, but inside, her heart was heavy. And without realizing it, she kept attracting partners who were emotionally unavailable, men who mirrored back her own sense of disconnect. She wasn't cursed, and she wasn't unlucky. She was simply meeting her own unhealed reflection. On the other hand, I met another woman who had spent years doubting herself, always questioning if she was enough. And guess what? She found herself in friendships and relationships where her voice was overlooked, where her boundaries were tested, where her confidence was constantly challenged. Again, not because she deserved mistreatment, but because her energy was broadcasting uncertainty, and the world simply reflected it back. The mirror effect is not punishment, it's revelation. It's life saying, here's what you still need to see. Here's what you still need to heal. And that can be painful, yes, but it's also liberating. Because the moment you bring your attention inward, the moment you start tending to your own peace, the reflection begins to change. Science backs this up. Psychologists call it projection. The mind unconsciously pushes inner feelings onto the outside world. Neuroscience goes further, reminding us that the brain is wired to filter reality through our emotional state. If you're anxious, you literally see the world through a narrowed, fearful lens. But if you're calm, your brain gives you access to clarity, creativity, and connection. So here's the invitation. Instead of asking, why is the world treating me this way? Try asking, what in me is being mirrored back right now? That question shifts the power. Suddenly, you're no longer a victim of circumstance, you're a student of it. And when you do the inner work, when you sit in silence, when you heal old wounds, when you begin to trust yourself again, everything around you begins to shift. Not because people magically change, but because you do. Your presence becomes different. Your energy becomes steady. And the world mirrors that back with respect, with opportunities, with healthier love. The mirror effect teaches us this simple truth. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. So the real question is, what reflection are you sending out today?
There's a kind of power that doesn't come from words at all. It comes from presence, from how you breathe, how you carry yourself, how you hold your ground when no one else is holding you. Think about it. Before you even speak a word, your body is already communicating. Your posture, your eyes, the pace of your breath, all of it is a silent language. And the world reads that language far more clearly than most people realize. I once met a woman named Maya. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and creative. But in work meetings, she was often overlooked. Her ideas were strong, but she presented them hesitantly. Eyes down, shoulders hunched, voice soft. What she didn't realize was that her body was speaking doubt, even while her words were saying something valuable. One day, she attended a workshop on embodied stillness, learning how to inhabit her body fully. Each morning, she began a small ritual, standing barefoot for a few minutes, breathing deeply, rolling her shoulders back, grounding her feet into the floor. Slowly, something changed. She wasn't trying to perform confidence, she was simply practicing presence. And when she returned to those meetings, people noticed. Her voice carried steadiness. Her posture radiated calm certainty. The next time she spoke, the room grew quiet, not because she shouted, but because she spoke from her center. Her presence alone commanded attention. That's the hidden strength of embodied stillness. You don't need to be the loudest in the room. You don't have to push or prove yourself. When you are aligned, when your inner state and your outer body are working together, you naturally draw respect. Science explains why. The nervous system doesn't just respond to thoughts,
It responds to posture, breathing, and movement. When you breathe slowly, you tell your body, "I am safe." When you hold your shoulders back and keep your gaze steady, you signal confidence, not just to others, but to your own brain. And the more often you do this, the more it becomes your natural state. There's also a mystery in stillness. In a world addicted to speed, the person who moves slowly, who pauses before responding, who chooses their words carefully, becomes magnetic. People lean in, not because you're hiding something, but because your presence has weight. Your yes feels solid, your no is unquestionable, and your silence carries as much meaning as your words. This kind of power doesn't make people feel pushed away. It makes them feel safe. A calm presence doesn't create tension. It creates space where authenticity can breathe. Children sense it from a mother. Partners sense it in a relationship. Colleagues sense it in leadership. And here's the beauty. Embodied stillness isn't about pretending to be strong. It's about returning to yourself. It's about aligning your breath, your body, and your awareness until they all move together. When that happens, you don't just enter a room, you shift the energy of the room. So ask yourself, how do you carry yourself when you walk in? Are you scattered or are you grounded? Do you rush to fill the silence, or do you allow silence to speak for you? Because the truth is this: the world may listen to your words, but it always feels your presence. And when that presence is steady, authentic, and calm, it becomes unforgettable.
There's a kind of wisdom in realizing that not everything deserves your response. Not every question needs an answer. Not every message deserves a reply. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. We live in a world that pressures us to always be available. The phone buzzes, you're expected to reply. Someone criticizes you, you're expected to defend yourself. A friend sends a passive-aggressive comment, you're expected to explain. But here's the truth. Constant response is not connection. It's captivity. Choosing not to respond doesn't mean you're cold. It means you're discerning. It means you've stopped giving away your energy to places that don't deserve it. Silence can be a boundary, but no response can be an even louder statement. I knew a woman named Claire who always answered everything immediately. If her grown children texted late at night, she responded. If a coworker sent a demanding email, she dropped everything to reply. If her partner pushed her buttons, she argued back. She thought this made her responsible, caring, engaged, but really, it left her drained. One day, after yet another late-night argument over text, she decided to pause. She didn't type back, she didn't explain herself. She simply put her phone down, took a breath, and went to bed. The next morning, she expected chaos. Instead, she found clarity. The issue wasn't nearly as urgent as it felt in the moment. And for the first time, she realized, my silence said more than my words ever could. Psychologists talk about something called the power of withdrawal. When you stop feeding unhealthy dynamics, they lose their hold on you. A conversation only becomes a fight if you step into the ring. Sometimes refusing to step in is the most powerful move you can make.
Think of it like this. Every time you respond, you're spending emotional currency. The question is, are you spending it wisely? Or are you going broke by answering every little demand that comes your way? Science even confirms this. When you constantly respond to every ping, every word, your brain is caught in hyperreactivity. Stress hormones spike, your nervous system never settles, and your clarity fades. But when you step back, when you choose no response, you give your nervous system space to reset. That space is where wisdom lives. And here's the beauty. No response is not avoidance. It's alignment. It's saying, I don't need to prove myself here. I don't need to fight for this space. My peace is not on the table. That silence often unsettles people, not because you're being cruel, but because they can no longer control your attention. So ask yourself, how many times have you answered when silence would have been stronger? How many times have you defended yourself to someone who never intended to understand you? What if next time you let your quiet be the answer? Because sometimes the clearest no isn't spoken, it's felt. And when you embrace that, you discover a freedom you didn't know you had. You stop being a prisoner to every message, every mood, every demand. You reclaim your attention, and with it, you reclaim yourself.
Let me share with you 2 stories that show how powerful a simple pause can be. The first is about Aya. For most of her life, she was known for her fire. When someone crossed a line, she reacted instantly. Her voice rose, her heart raced, and her words cut sharp. She was intelligent and quick-witted, and she thought her strong reactions proved she wouldn't be disrespected. And maybe in the moment it looked like she won, but every time she walked away, she felt drained, like the argument had taken more from her than the original offense ever could. One afternoon, during a tense conversation with a colleague who had just undermined her in a meeting, she felt the familiar heat rise in her chest. Every cell in her body screamed to fire back. But instead of lashing out, she took a deep breath. She paused. She looked at him, and she said nothing. That silence wasn't empty. It was full of restraint, full of clarity, full of quiet strength. And in that pause, she realized something. The need to prove herself was born from the fear of being unseen. But when you truly know your worth, you don't have to perform it for others. That day, she discovered that her power didn't come from reacting, but from choosing. The colleague backed down, not because she fought harder, but because she stood anchored. Now, let's talk about Sophia. She was in her late 30s, and for years, every disagreement with her partner ended in tears, shouting, or silence filled with resentment. She felt unheard, invalidated, and emotionally exhausted. She knew something had to change, so she started small, just 10 minutes a day of mindful breathing and keeping a journal of her feelings. Not polished writing, not for anyone else to see, just raw, honest words on paper. The next time conflict arose, Sophia noticed her body first, the tightening in her chest, the clenching of her jaw, the quickening of her breath. Instead of exploding, she said, "Give me a moment." She stepped away, not to escape, but to return to herself. She sat down, breathed slowly, and asked, "What am I really feeling, and why?" When she returned, she spoke, not from the storm, but from the center of it. For the first time in months, their conversation didn't spiral into chaos. It wasn't perfect, but it was present.
Psychologists will tell you this. When you pause before reacting, you interrupt the automatic cycle of fight or flight. Your brain shifts from the amygdala, the emotional alarm system, to the prefrontal cortex, where logic, wisdom, and empathy live. In other words, a simple pause can rewire the way you show up in the world. Both Aya and Sophia learned this truth. Silence and breath are not weaknesses. They are tools. They are choices. They are ways of reclaiming the energy we've been giving away to conflict, overreaction, and old habits. And maybe this is a question worth asking yourself. The next time you feel the urge to fire back, to defend, to explode, what might happen if you paused instead? What truth might reveal itself in that stillness? Because sometimes the greatest strength isn't in the words you say, but in the power you choose not to waste.
There's a kind of freedom most people never experience. It's called emotional sovereignty, the ability to remain steady inside yourself no matter what storm is happening around you. Think about how often we let other people's moods dictate our own. Someone snaps at you in traffic, and suddenly your whole morning is ruined. Your partner comes home frustrated, and now you're carrying their weight on your shoulders. A friend sends a sharp text, and you find yourself replaying it in your mind for hours. Without realizing it, we hand over the keys to our inner world. We let everyone else drive our emotions. But here's the truth. You don't have to live that way. Emotional sovereignty means you stop outsourcing your peace. You stop letting someone else's anger, fear, or chaos decide the rhythm of your day. Instead, you reclaim authorship of your own nervous system. And it starts with something very simple. Pause. Breathe. Observe before you react. When you feel triggered, your body instantly goes into fight or flight. The amygdala, the fear center of your brain, fires off alarms. But when you take even one conscious breath, you interrupt that cycle. You give your prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic and wisdom, a chance to step in. Neuroscience proves this. One deep breath literally changes the way your brain responds. Let me tell you about a man I once coached. He spent years in constant conflict with his teenage son. Every conversation turned into shouting, slamming doors, days of cold silence. One day, during another heated exchange, he did something different. He paused. He closed his eyes for just a second and took one slow breath. Then, instead of reacting, he simply said, "Give me a moment." That pause shifted the entire tone. His son, who expected a fight, was disarmed. And for the first time, they actually spoke instead of screamed. That's emotional sovereignty in action. Not perfection, not suppressing feelings, but choosing presence over impulse. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you stop reacting to every emotional tug of war, you don't become cold, you become clear. People around you may not always like it, but they will respect it. They'll sense that you can't be pulled into every game, every drama. Your peace is no longer up for grabs. This doesn't mean you don't feel. Quite the opposite. You may feel more deeply than ever. But sovereignty means you're not enslaved by those feelings. You can feel anger without lashing out. You can feel grief without collapsing. You can feel love without losing yourself. So here's a question. How much of your day is ruled by reactions you didn't choose? And what would your life look like if you could pause, breathe, and respond from clarity instead. Because emotional sovereignty isn't about controlling the world. It's about mastering your response to it. It's about knowing that no matter what happens out there, you still decide what happens in here. And that kind of freedom, that's worth more than anything.
Have you ever thought about how much energy we waste every day trying to prove ourselves? Explaining, defending, chasing approval. It drains us more than we realize. And the truth is, that energy could be the very fuel we need to live the life we keep postponing. When you stop over-explaining, when you stop bending over backwards just to be accepted, something amazing happens. You suddenly have energy again. Energy to take care of your health, energy to create, energy to focus on what actually matters. I once knew a woman named Teresa. For years, she lived for everyone else's validation. At work, she over-delivered because she didn't want to be questioned. With friends, she always explained her choices so no one would misjudge her. Even in her marriage, she justified every little decision as if her worth depended on being understood. By the end of each day, she was exhausted, not from physical work, but from emotional overwork. Then, one evening, while journaling, she asked herself a simple question. What would I do with all this energy if I stopped trying to please everyone? That question changed her life. She began practicing small acts of conservation, choosing silence instead of justification, walking away instead of debating, pausing instead of defending. And with each choice, she noticed something. She felt lighter. She slept better. She started painting again, a passion she had abandoned years before. She even had the energy to begin a walking routine that improved her health. Psychologists call this attention economy. Your attention is like currency. Wherever you spend it, energy follows. When you pour it into defending yourself, you strengthen anxiety and self-doubt. But when you redirect it toward creativity, health, and purpose, you strengthen joy, clarity, and growth. Science agrees. Studies on willpower show that mental energy is limited, like a battery that drains throughout the day. If you spend that battery on endless arguments or chasing approval, by the time evening comes, you've got nothing left for what matters most. But when you conserve it, when you stop giving away explanations that aren't needed, you discover a surplus of energy you didn't know you had. And here's the beauty. This kind of energy doesn't just improve your inner life, it attracts opportunities. When you're rested, creative, and focused, people notice. Doors open. Connections deepen. You stop chasing and you start drawing in, because the world is naturally drawn to those who are alive with their own energy. So let me ask you, how much of your energy is being wasted on trying to be understood? And what might happen if you redirected even half of that toward your health, your passions, your future? The answer is simple. You'd feel more alive, more grounded, more magnetic. Not because you did more, but because you stopped wasting energy on what doesn't matter. That's the hidden gift of silence. It saves your energy for the life you truly want.
There's a big difference between disappearing and withdrawing with wisdom. Strategic withdrawal is not ghosting, it's not punishment, it's not playing games. It's the conscious choice to step back and reclaim your energy from places that no longer honor it. Think of it this way. Every relationship, every conversation is like a dance. If you keep pouring energy into someone who doesn't value it, you'll end up exhausted. But when you step back, when you create space, the truth begins to reveal itself. You find out who reaches for you and who only stood close because you kept doing all the reaching. I once knew a woman named Amira. She had been in an on-again, off-again relationship for years. She talked, she explained, she compromised, she pleaded, yet the cycle never changed. One day, she made a different choice. She didn't fight, she didn't argue, she didn't announce anything. She simply became quiet. That silence wasn't cold, it was clarity. And in that space, she heard a deeper voice within. It's time to let go. For the first time, she saw the relationship for what it truly was, not what she wished it could be. This is the power of strategic withdrawal. It gives you perspective. It filters out the noise. It lets you see who respects your presence and who only relied on your effort. Psychology explains why this works. When you step back, you interrupt the familiar patterns of conflict. Instead of reinforcing dysfunction, you create distance. That distance forces the other person to reveal their true intentions. Will they step forward to meet you, or will they let the connection die because it was only alive when you carried it? And here's the key. Withdrawal isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing when a situation no longer deserves your constant investment. It's refusing to carry relationships alone. It's protecting your peace like sacred ground. Some people won't like it when you withdraw. They'll call you distant, selfish, maybe even cold. But what they're really feeling is your boundary. They're noticing the energetic space you now protect. And that space is exactly what allows you to breathe, to heal, to see clearly. So ask yourself, where are you still pouring energy just to keep something alive? And what would happen if you stepped back, not out of bitterness, but out of respect for yourself? Because here's the truth. A woman or a man who knows when to withdraw is a person who knows their worth. They are not afraid of being alone because they're no longer lonely in themselves. They don't chase answers. They trust that clarity always comes in time. Strategic withdrawal doesn't end connection. It reveals it. And in that revelation, you discover something priceless: peace.
There's a shift every woman eventually faces. The journey from needing to be seen to simply shining on her own. When confidence is fragile, it's natural to look outside for proof. We chase recognition. We seek applause. We crave the words, "You matter." And for a while, it feels like oxygen. But here's the hard truth. When your worth depends on someone else's approval, you'll always be running short of breath. I once spoke with a woman named Elena. For years, she lived for validation. At work, she waited for her boss to recognize her effort. In relationships, she gave endlessly, hoping to be chosen, hoping to feel enough. And on social media, she posted every detail of her life, desperate for likes that might silence her inner doubt. But no matter how much she received, it was never enough. The hole inside her could not be filled from the outside. Her breakthrough came in a quiet moment. One morning, sitting alone with a cup of tea, she asked herself, "What if no one ever clapped for me again? Would I still be worth something?" The question rattled her, but it opened a door.
Slowly, she began to redirect her focus inward. She started journaling, not to be impressive, but to be honest. She took walks without posting them. She created art without showing anyone. And little by little, she discovered a freedom she had never known, the freedom of not needing to be seen in order to exist. Psychologists call this intrinsic worth, the ability to value yourself independent of external feedback. Neuroscience even supports it. When you practice self-reflection and gratitude, the brain rewires to strengthen inner confidence. You literally train your mind to find security inside rather than outside. And here's the paradox. The moment Elena stopped trying to be seen, people started noticing her more. Not because she was louder, not because she worked harder, but because her presence changed. She carried herself differently. Her calm was magnetic. She no longer needed the spotlight. She became the spotlight. This is the mystery of true presence. When you stop hustling for attention, attention naturally finds you. When you stop begging to be recognized, your authenticity speaks louder than any performance ever could. Ask yourself, how often are you still seeking to be seen? And what would shift in your life if you chose instead to shine from within? Because here's the truth. A woman who no longer needs to be validated is unshakable. She doesn't crumble when overlooked. She doesn't shrink when misunderstood. Her worth is anchored, and that anchoring makes her radiant. You don't have to chase visibility. You don't have to fight to be noticed. When you are aligned within yourself, you don't need to try. You are. And that quiet glow, that's what makes you unforgettable.
So, here's what it all comes down to. Silence is not weakness, it's presence. It's the quiet confidence that says, I know who I am, and I will not abandon myself to be understood by others. When you stop explaining every choice, when you stop chasing approval, when you withdraw from what drains you, you begin to notice something. Life gets clearer. The people who truly value you stay. The ones who only fed on your energy drift away. And in that space, you finally hear the sound of your own voice again. This is the quiet transformation, from needing to be seen to shining naturally, from being pulled into every storm to becoming the calm within it, from outsourcing your peace to carrying it with you wherever you go. And the beauty is that you don't have to force it. You don't have to shout, demand, or prove. When you choose silence with awareness, when you stand steady in your own presence, the world begins to rearrange itself around you. Opportunities come, relationships grow deeper, and respect flows without you asking for it. Remember this, your greatest power is not in how loudly you speak, but in how deeply you are anchored. And when you live from that place, you don't just change your life, you change the atmosphere around you. Sometimes, the most powerful voice is the one that chooses silence.